sleep enough. Purport: regulation of diet and sleep is recommended herein for the yogis. Too much eating means eating. Too much eating means eating more than is required to keep the body and soul together. There is no need for men to eat animals because there is an ample supply of grains, vegetables, fruits, and milk. Such simple foodstuffs is considered to be in the mode of goodness. According to the Bhagavad Gita, animal food is for those in the mode of ignorance. Therefore, those who indulge in animal food, drinking, smoking, and eating food which is not first offered to Krishna will suffer sinful reactions because of eating only polluted things. Vunjate te tva agham papaye pachanti atmakaranat. Anyone who eats for sense pleasure or cooks for himself, not offering food to Krishna, eats only sin. One who eats sin and eats more than is allotted to him cannot execute perfect yoga. It is best that one eat only the remnants of foodstuffs offered to Krishna. A person in Krishna consciousness does not eat anything which is not first offered to Krishna. Therefore, only the Krishna conscious person can attain perfection in yoga practice. Nor can one who artificially abstains from eating, manufacturing his own personal process of fasting, practice yoga. The Krishna conscious person observes fast as it is recommended in the scriptures. He does not fast or eat more than is required. And he is thus competent to perform yoga practice. One who eats more than required will dream very much while sleeping, and he must consequently sleep more than is required. One should not sleep more than 6 hours daily. One who sleeps more than 6 hours out of 24 hours is certainly influenced by the mode of ignorance. A person in the mode of ignorance is lazy and prone to sleep a great deal. Such a person cannot perform yoga. Text 17. Yuktahara viharasya yukta chetasya karmasu yukta swapna bhabodhasya yogo bhavati dukkhaha. He who is temperate in his habits of eating, sleeping, working, and recreation can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. Purport: extravagance in the matter of eating, sleeping, defending, and mating, which are demands of the body, can block advancement in the practice of yoga. As far as eating is concerned, it can be regulated only when one is practiced to take and accept prasadam, sanctified food. Lord Krishna is offered, according to the Bhagavad Gita 9.26, vegetables, flowers, fruits, grains, milk, etc. In this way, a person in Krishna consciousness becomes automatically trained not to accept food not meant for human consumption, or which is not in the category of goodness. As far as sleeping is concerned, a Krishna conscious person is always alert in the discharge of his duties in Krishna consciousness, and therefore any unnecessary time spent sleeping is considered a great loss. A Krishna conscious person cannot bear to pass a minute of his life without being engaged in the service of the Lord. Therefore, his sleeping is kept to a minimum. His ideal in this respect is Srila Rupa Goswami, who was always engaged in the service of Krishna and who could not sleep more than 2 hours a day, and sometimes not even that. Thakur Haridas would not even accept prasadam, nor even sleep for a moment without finishing his daily routine of chanting with his beads 300,000 names. As far as work is concerned, a Krishna conscious person does not do anything which is not connected with Krishna's interest. And thus his work is always regulated and is untainted by sense gratification. Since there is no question of sense gratification, there is no material leisure for a person in Krishna consciousness. And because he is regulated in all his work, speech, sleep, wakefulness, and all other bodily activities, there is no material misery for him. Text 18. Yada viniyatam chittam atmani evavatisthate nishpraha sarvakamebhyo yukta iti uchyate tada. Translation. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to have attained yoga. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to have attained yoga. Purport. The activities of the yogi are distinguished from those of an ordinary person by his characteristic cessation from all kinds of material desires, of which sex is the chief. A perfect yogi is so well disciplined in the activities of the mind that he can no longer be disturbed by any kind of material desire. This perfectional stage can automatically be attained by persons in Krishna consciousness, as is stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam 9:4-18-20. Savai mana Krishna padaravindyor vachamsi vaikuntha gunanuvarnane karau harer mandira marjanadishu shrutim chakarachyuta sadkathodaye Mukundalingalaya darshane drishau tadvrityagatra sparsenga sangamam grihamnam cha tat pada saroja saurave Srimatulasya rasanam tadarpite Pado Hare Kshetra Padanus Sarpane Siro Risikesa Pada Vivandane Kamam Chadasyena Tu Kama Kamyaya Yathottama Sloka Janashrayarati. King Ambarish first of all engaged his mind in the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Then, one after another, he engaged his words in describing the transcendental qualities of the Lord, his hands in mopping the temple of the Lord, his ears in hearing of the activities of the Lord, his eyes in seeing the transcendental form of the Lord, his body in touching the bodies of the devotees, his sense of smell in smelling the scent of the lotus flower offered to the Lord, his tongue in tasting the tulasi leaf offered at the lotus feet of the Lord, his legs in going to places of pilgrimage and the temple of the Lord, his head in offering obeisances unto the Lord, and his desires in executing the mission of the Lord. All these transcendental activities are quite befitting a pure devotee. This transcendental stage may be inexpressible subjectively by the followers of the impersonalist path, but it becomes very easy and practical for a person in Krishna consciousness, as is apparent in the above description of the engagements of Maharaj Ambarish. Unless the mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord by constant remembrance, such transcendental engagements are not practical. In the devotional service of the Lord, therefore, these prescribed activities are called archana, or engaging all the senses in the service of the Lord. The senses and the mind require engagements. Simple abnegation is not practical. Therefore, for For people in general, especially those who are not in the renounced order of life, transcendental engagement of the senses and the mind, as described above, is a perfect process for transcendental achievement, which is called yukta in the Bhagavad Gita. Text 19. Yatha dipo nivatasto nengate sopama smrita yogino yata chittasya yunjato yogam atmana. Translation. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. As a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. Purport. A truly Krishna conscious person, always absorbed in transcendence, in constant undisturbed meditation on his worshipable Lord, is as steady as a lamp in a windless place. Text 20 to 23. Yatro paramate chittam niruddham yoga sevaya yatra chaivatmanatmanam pashyanatmani tushyati sukham atyantikam yatad buddhigrahyam atindriyam vetti yatra na chaivayam sitaschalati tattvataha yam labdva cha param labham manyate nadhikam tata yasmin stito na dukhena gurunapi vichalyate tam vidya dukha samyoga yogam yoga samgnitam. Translation. The stage of perfection is called trance or samadhi, when one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness and enjoys himself through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Purport. By practice of yoga, one becomes gradually detached from material concepts. This is the primary characteristic of the yoga principle. And after this, one becomes situated in trance or samadhi, which means that the yogi realizes the supersoul through transcendental mind and intelligence without any of the misgivings of identifying without any of the misgivings of identifying the self with the super self. Yoga practice is more or less based on the principle of the Patanjali system. Some unauthorized commentators try to identify the individual soul with the supersoul, and the monists think this to be liberation. But they do not understand the real purpose of the Patanjali system of yoga. There is an acceptance of transcendental pleasure in the Patanjali system, but the monists do not accept this transcendental pleasure out of fear of jeopardizing the theory of oneness. The duality of knowledge and knower is not accepted by the non-dualist. But in this verse, transcendental pleasure realized through transcendental sunset is accepted. And this is corroborated by the Patanjali Muni, the famous exponent of the yoga system. The great sage declares in his Yoga Sutras, Purusartha Sunnyanam Gunanam Prati Prashavaha Kaivalyam Swarupa Pratishtha Vachiti Saktiriti. This Chiti Sakti or internal potency is transcendental. Purusartha means material religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and at the end the attempt to become one with the Supreme. This oneness with the Supreme is called Kaivalyam by the monist. But according to Patanjali, this Kaivalyam is an internal or transcendental potency by which the living entity becomes aware of its constitutional position. In other words, in the words of Lord Chaitanya, this state of affairs is called Cheto Darpana Marjanam, or clearance of the impure mirror of the mind. This clearance is actually liberation, or Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam. The theory of Nirvana, also preliminary, corresponds with this principle. In the Bhagavatam, this is called Swarupena Vyavasthiti. The Bhagavad Gita also confirms this situation in this verse. After Nirvana, the material cessation, there is the manifestation of spiritual activities or devotional service of the Lord, known as Krishna consciousness. In the words of the Bhagavatam, Swarupena Vyavasthiti, this is the real life of the living entity. Maya, or illusion, is the condition of spiritual life contaminated by material infection. Liberation from this material infection does not mean destruction of the original eternal position of the living entity. Patanjali also accepts this by his word Kaivalyam Swarupa Pratishtha Va Chiti Saktiriti. This Chiti Sakti or transcendental pleasure is real life. This is confirmed in the Vedanta Sutras as Ananda Mayo Vyashat. This natural transcendental pleasure is the ultimate goal of yoga and is easily achieved by execution of devotional service or Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga will be vividly described in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. In the yoga system, as described in this chapter, there are two kinds of samadhi called sampragya and asampragyata samadhi. Asampragyata samadhi. When one becomes situated in the transcendental position by various philosophical researches, it is called sampragyata samadhi. In the asampragyata samadhi, there is no longer any connection with mundane pleasure. One is then transcendental to all sorts of happiness derived from the senses. Is one situated in that transcendental position, he is never taken from it. Unless the yogi is able to reach this position, he is unsuccessful. Today's so-called yoga practice, which involves various sense pleasures, is contradictory. A yogi indulging in sex and intoxication is a mockery. Even those yogis who are attracted by the siddhis, perfection, in the process of yoga are not perfectly situated. If the yogis are attracted by the byproducts of yoga, then they cannot attain the stage of perfection, as is stated in this verse. Persons therefore indulging in the make-so practice of gymnastic feats and siddhis should know that the aim of yoga is lost in that way. The best practice of yoga in this age is Krishna consciousness, which is not baffling. A Krishna conscious person is so happy in his occupation that he does not aspire after any other happiness. There are many impediments, especially in this age of hypocrisy, to practicing Hatha Yoga, Dhyana Yoga and Jnana Yoga, but there is no such problem in executing Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. As long as the material body exists, one has to meet the demands of the body, namely eating, sleeping, defending and mating. But a person who is in pure Bhakti Yoga or in Krishna consciousness does not arouse the senses while meeting the demands of the body. Rather, he accepts the bare necessities of life in making the best use of a bad bargain and enjoys transcendental happiness in Krishna consciousness. He is callous towards incidental occurrences such as accidents, disease, scarcity, and even the death of a most dear relative. But he is always alert to execute his duties in Krishna consciousness or Bhakti Yoga. Accidents never deviate him from his duty. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Agamapaino nityastam titikshashva varata. He endures all such incidental occurrences because he knows that they come and go and do not affect his duties. In this way he achieves the highest perfection in yoga practice. Text 24. Sa nishchayena yuktavyo yogo nirvinna chetasa sankalpa prabhavan kamams tyaktva sarvamasesataha manasvaivendriya gramam viniyam cha samantata. Translation: one should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with undeviating determination and faith. One should abandon without exception all material desires, born of false ego, and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind. Purport: the yoga practitioner should be determined and should patiently prosecute the practice without deviation. One should be sure of success at the end and pursue this course with great perseverance, not becoming discouraged if there is any delay in the attainment of success. Success is sure for the rigid practitioner. Regarding Bhakti Yoga, Rupa Goswami says, Utsaha nishchaya dharya tatkat karma pravartanat sanga tyaga sato vrite sadvir bhakti prashidyati. The process of Bhakti Yoga can be executed successfully with full-hearted enthusiasm, perseverance, and determination by following the prescribed duties in the association of devotees and by engaging completely in the activities of goodness. As for determination, one should follow the example of the sparrow who lost her eggs in the waves of the ocean. A sparrow laid her eggs on the shore of the ocean, but the big ocean carried away the eggs on its wave. The sparrow became very upset and asked the ocean to return her eggs. The ocean did not even consider her appeal. So the sparrow decided to dry up the ocean. She began to pick up the water in her small beak, and everyone laughed at her for her impossible determination. The news of her activity spread, and at last Garuda, the gigantic bird carrier of Lord Vishnu, heard it. He became compassionate toward his small sister bird. So he came to see the sparrow. Garuda was very pleased by the determination of the small sparrow, and he promised to help. Thus Garuda at once asked the ocean to return her eggs, lest he himself take up the work of the sparrow. The ocean was frightened at this and returned the eggs. Thus the sparrow became happy by the grace of Garuda. Similarly, the practice of yoga, especially bhakti yoga and Krishna consciousness, may appear to be a very difficult job. But if anyone follows the principle with great determination, the Lord will surely help. For God helps those who help themselves. Text 25. Sanai sanair uparamid buddhaya driti gritaya atma samstham mana kritva na kinchidapi chintayet. Gradually, step by step, with full conviction, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence. And thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. Purport: by proper conviction and intelligence, one should gradually cease sense activities. By proper conviction and intelligence, one should gradually cease sense activities. This is called pratyahara. The mind, being controlled by conviction, meditation, and cessation of the senses, should be situated in trance or samadhi. At that time, there is no longer any danger of becoming engaged in the material conception of life. In other words, although one is involved with matter as long as the material body exists, one should not think about sense gratification. One should think of no pleasure aside from the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. This state is easily attained by directly practicing Krishna consciousness. Text 26. Yato yato nischalati manaschañchalam asthiram tatastato niyamyaitat atmani eva vasam nayet. From whatever and wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. Purport: the nature of the mind is flickering and unsteady, but a self-realized yogi has to control the mind. The mind should not control him. One who controls the mind and therefore the senses as well is called Goswami or Swami. And one who is controlled by the mind is called Godas or the servant of the senses. A Goswami knows the standard of sense happiness. In transcendental sense happiness, the senses are engaged in the service of Hrishikesha, or the supreme owner of the senses, Krishna. Serving with purified senses is called Krishna consciousness. That is a way of bringing the senses under full control. What is more, that is the highest perfection of yoga practice. Jai Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Jai Shri Prabhupada ki jai.